Hello, and welcome back to another Daily Top 10's Top 10 video. Today, we're going to be looking at the top 10 worst Oscar hosts. They're meant to be a celebration of everything wonderful about the movies. So why, oh why, did the Oscars decide to hire these awful hosts? They can't all be winners, as our top 10 ably show. Number 10. Chevy Chase, 1988. It's quite popular to hate on the curmudgeonly Chevy Chase in 2017, but in 1988, he got his first taste of scorn from his audience. Chase's famously terrible turn as Oscar host was no doubt impacted by the 1988 writer's strike. And while it's true that the material he was working with was very thin, it was the schmarm, the sneers, and the rants that lost the audience. You can't be in for a great night when your opening gambit is, "Good evening, Hollywood phonies." Way to set the tone, Chevy.
Good evening, Hollywood phonies. Welcome to Tinseltown, the Athens of the West.
Number 9. Jerry Lewis, 1959. You know how the Oscars always go on for way too long? Well, it's not any better when it runs under time, as Jerry Lewis demonstrated during his third stab at hosting. With 20 minutes of time to fill at the end, Lewis elected to start bringing audience members onto the stage, between a whole bunch of flubs and ad-libs. Some admire Lewis for doing his best under trying circumstances, but many more disagree.
What's the downbeat? Because this might be it. We might get a bar mitzvah from this whole thing.
Number 8. Walter Matthau, Liza Minnelli, Dudley Moore, and Richard Pryor, 1983. There was a time when it was more common to have multiple hosts than just one, but with the benefit of hindsight, this was never a good approach. Exhibit A, this 1983 car wreck. The biggest issue is that it's clear that half of them haven't prepared. While Minnelli seems fairly on top of things, the three guys don't know their cues, show little commitment, and generally bumble about on stage. Check out the appalling opening number. Perhaps the biggest question is why these four? There has seldom been a more mismatched collection of hosts. Reports at the time suggest that Pryor and Moore spent a decent amount of time arguing when they weren't on stage. Number 7. Steve Martin and Alec Baldwin. This one's just frustrating, because Steve Martin's done a great job hosting the Oscars on more than one occasion. And hey, wouldn't you expect Alec Baldwin's dry, acerbic wit to fit like a glove on Oscar night? Unfortunately, all Baldwin did was remind us of how funny Martin is when he's flying solo. It wasn't that this Oscar telecast was bad, it was just so resoundingly mediocre. And to make Steve Martin a mediocre host takes some doing.
All of us in Hollywood thought the same thing. What's 5 times 2?
And having 10 films.
Number 6. Will Rogers, 1934. Here's one that we haven't actually got any footage of because, well, no one was filming. However, we have a very good source that's filled us in on what made comedian/silver screen cowboy Will Rogers such a bad host. The Academy Awards' The Unofficial History labeled Will's lowest moment as host one of the most famously humiliating scenes in Academy Awards history. The catalyst for this scene? Rogers' choice of words when announcing the winner of Best Director gong. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Come up and get it, Frank. Sounds harmless enough, you might say. And maybe it would have been, if there hadn't been 2 men named Frank up for the Oscar. Of course, the wrong man, Frank Capra, excitedly ran up to the stage, only to have it clarified that Frank Lloyd was the actual winner. Capra took the longest walk back to his seat anyone's ever undertaken at the Oscars. Will Rogers goes to show that if you can't announce the winner properly, you probably shouldn't have been given the hosting gig in the first place. Number 5. Sammy Davis Jr., Bob Hope, Shirley MacLaine, and Frank Sinatra, 1975. Davis Jr., Hope, MacLaine, Sinatra. That should be a party, right? Unfortunately, it was a very dour affair, with many of the hosts and presenters spending their time protesting the Vietnam War and offering political rants. That's fine if you're going to commit to it, but Sinatra couldn't, reading out a statement criticizing the political views and opinions of the winners. The whole event had an inconsistent tone, resulting in a night that didn't know what it wanted to be. We've said it before and we'll say it again. Group hosting just doesn't work. But this isn't even the worst of them. Don't worry, we haven't forgotten about those two. You know the ones. Just wait. Number 4. Seth MacFarlane 2013. We kind of knew this one would go bad the moment Seth MacFarlane was announced as host. Family Guy has its charms, some would argue, anyway, but its sledgehammer jokiness and risque approach is entirely the wrong tone to try to shoehorn into an evening at the Oscars. A musical number titled Show Us Your Boobs was never going to feel right between acceptance speeches from Jennifer Lawrence and Daniel Day-Lewis.
And Hathaway, we saw your boobs in Brokeback Mountain. Halle Berry, we saw them in Monsters Ball. Nicole Kidman and Eyes Wide Shut, Marissa Tomei and The Wrestler, but...
Number 3. David Letterman, 1995. Here's a few of the critical notices the day after David Letterman hosted the Oscars in 1995. He never knew when to let bad enough alone. Applause died long before most winners even reached the podium. The winner isn't David Letterman. Perhaps that's why, to this day, many regard this as the worst Oscar hosting performance. And here's what has become perhaps the most infamously bad moment in Oscar history. We guess the joke is that they have unusual names.
Uma? Oprah? I feel much better.
Number 2. James Franco and Anne Hathaway, 2011. This is what happens when an unstoppable, over-energized force meets an unmovable and possibly stoned object. Anne Hathaway, say hello to James Franco. We can't imagine they're friends anymore. What's he playing at here?
Congratulations, nerds. And now, an extraordinary actress who I'm fairly certain is the only woman to ever successfully play Queen Elizabeth I.
The famously derided Oscar pairing was a match made in hell. At least we can give Hathaway points for trying, even if she's trying way, way too hard.
You know,
All right.
it used to be, you get naked, you get nominated. Not anymore.
Number 1. Nobody, 1989. If all these people stunk up the joint so much, you may think that maybe the best idea would be to leave out the host altogether. The bad news is that 1989 gave that one a go. And trust us, it's worse. It was by turns dull, directionless, and staid. This was the year that the Oscars were so bad that 17 Hollywood heavyweights wrote an open letter to the Academy bemoaning the event as an embarrassment to both the Academy and the entire motion picture industry. But worst of all was the opening number, which sees an awful lot of cheese while Rob Lowe attempts to sing and fails spectacularly.
Come here from Pacoima. Words with a C in it are funny.
Thanks for watching another Daily Top 10's Top 10 video. And remember, it's our duty to entertain and yours to subscribe.
Hey, what's up guys? Please subscribe to Daily Top 10. Yeah, subscribe. Press the button down below and just subscribe. I don't fucking know, my job sucks. There's a button down below, click it and just subscribe. Oh, and here's my Mexican hat. That seems funny, entertainment, yeah. Basically that's it, just subscribe, Daily Top 10. This is so boring. I give up, I just quit, fuck it.